recording in progress, which we need to let you know that this is being recorded because you'll be part of it. This is our second meeting of the year. Our last one was in September. We meet on the third Tuesday of every month for any of you who are new, and you can always look on our website to see what programs are upcoming. We try always to have a meeting every year about cochlear implants because they're becoming more and more available to people, and they are kind of a big mystery to a lot of people. And tonight's meeting, we tried to show cochlear implants as they are used across generations. I want to make a few business-like announcements first, and then I'll tell you a little bit about the program. For those of you, I know there are quite a few new people here. I'm Catherine Boughton. I'm president of the chapter, the New York City chapter, and thank you so much for joining us. I always want to make sure at the beginning of these meetings that everyone has access to the captions. They're down below where it says CC, hide captions. And if anyone doesn't, I guess if you could just wave in some way that might, okay.
Waving.
So that means you're not getting the captions, Vilma, no. Or you are getting them?
Vilma's not.
Okay.
Okay.
Is there any way?
Good. Okay. For anyone who prefers to get their captions on a separate device, like on an iPad, we have stream text, which can be made much larger. And so for people with vision issues, you might want to use that instead. The URL for that is in the chat. I think ordinarily probably nobody does use it, but it's good to know that it's there. Everybody, well, not everybody, but most people seem to be muted. And so we do ask that you go to the bottom left of your screen and click on the little microphone icon and mute yourself. And then when if you have a question or comment, you'll need to unmute yourself. And if you see us waving at you and saying you're muted, that means you have forgotten to unmute yourself. So and when we get to the Q&A part, and you have something to say, the best way to do that is to go to reactions, which is on the bottom of the screen. On my screen, it's the second from the right. If you click on that, you will see something that says raise hand, and basically raise your hand. In order, you'll be lined up on my screen and maybe other people's too, and I'll call on you in turn. And then when you're finished, if you can, remember to lower your hand. That's basically it for the business part of this. So I want to move on because we have a great panel here, and I'm really pleased. The moderator of the panel is Meghan Despotidis, who is at Columbia University. She's an audiologist, and she is now an assistant professor of audiology at Columbia University Medical Center. Her clinical focus is evaluating and programming adult patients with cochlear implants, and Meghan can tell us a little bit more about what she does. She's going to lead off the discussion with who she is. And then the other two panelists are Toni Iacolucci, who many of you probably know. She's been a member of our chapter for many, many years. She was a member of the National Board of HLAA, and she's a longtime advocate for people with hearing loss. In recent years, she's been focusing on bringing communication access to healthcare facilities, to city agencies and cultural venues in New York City. And she also works with the National Office on Communication Access in Healthcare. She has had a cochlear implant, I think, for about 2 years. Toni, is that right? Okay. And then our third speaker is a mother and son, Josh and Helen Kay Romeo. If you saw the announcement, you probably read their own description of who they are. Helen is, as she put it, 46 years young. It really sounds young to me. And she is married to her teenage crush, Will. And they've been married for 20 years. They have 2 children, and Josh is their older child. And I'll let her go on to tell you about herself later on. Josh was born bilaterally deaf. He was lucky enough to, at 13 months old, to get first one, I assume not at the same time, but one cochlear implant and then a second cochlear implant. His parents enrolled him in a special needs preschool where he had the help of a speech language therapist for the first 2 years, and that really helped him to learn English. And Josh has lots of plans. He's now a junior in Dover High School, which is in Dover Plains, New York. So I am going to pass this on to Meghan. We'd like each speaker, each group speakers, to do a presentation. I think Meghan has a PowerPoint. And then when we're finished, we'll leave plenty of time for questions. So when the question time comes, just remember that to raise your hand through reactions. So Meghan, this is over to you. And if anybody is not muted, please do so. And I will too. So Meghan, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Can everybody hear me okay? Yes? Okay. And can you see my slides? There's a cute little baby on it. Great. So I'm Meghan Despotidis. I'm one of the cochlear implant audiologists at Columbia University Medical Center. So tonight I'm briefly going to talk about the process of getting a cochlear implant and what that first year really looks like. And then afterwards, we'll open it up to the panel and you could hear their perspective firsthand about what a cochlear implant is like. Next. Okay, so unfortunately, I don't have a picture of our cochlear implant team, but this is the Columbia family at the New York City Walk for Hearing this past September. But the real reason I wanted to start here is that when you start a cochlear implant journey, you're not just meeting with an ENT doctor or the surgeon. You're meeting with a whole team. You're meeting with the audiologist, a speech language pathologist, a social worker, and then if you are a pediatric patient, you would also meet with the educator or teacher for the deaf. This is the team at Columbia University for the cochlear implant program. Next slide. So what is a cochlear implant? It is a system designed to help patients hear where traditional amplification or hearing loss or hearing aids no longer benefit them. It is a surgery and it does have 2 portions, an internal device and an external device. So the internal portion is surgically implanted under the skin by the ENT surgeon. And then the external component or the sound processor is worn behind your ear and on your head. The 2 components connect and communicate via a magnet connection. Next. How a cochlear implant works. I'm going to try to walk through this slide as briefly and as simply as possible. So if you look at figure number 1, that is the sound processor. And on the sound processor, similar to a hearing aid, there are 2 microphones. So the microphones are going to pick up the incoming sound, and the processor is going to convert it from an acoustic signal to an electric signal. As you could see in item number 2, the electric signal is then transferred from the coil to the implant under the skin via the magnet I was talking about before. Number 3 is showing that the signal is now sent down the electrode array into the cochlea, And then number 4, the signal is being sent onto the brain, and that is how you're processing this new electric sound. Next. So who is a candidate? I'm going to break it up between prelingually deafened patients and postlingually. So prelingually will be babies or any patient who has yet to develop language. Fortunately, in America, we have the newborn hearing screening, which helps diagnose children with hearing loss far before we would be able to notice anything behaviorally. So once a patient is diagnosed with a bilateral profound sensory neural hearing loss, they are a candidate for a cochlear implant. There's this general timeline called the 1, 2, 3, 9 month timeline. The goal is to have the hearing screening completed by 1 month old, diagnose the child with the profound hearing loss by 2 months of age, have a hearing aid trial period around the 3-month mark, and then ideally be implanted with a cochlear implant between 9 to 12 months. And then for the adult or the school age children, anybody who has developed language and is postlingually deaf, when do you think you would be a candidate for a cochlear implant? So I encourage patients when they start to realize that their hearing aids are not providing as much help as they used to. If you notice, not only are you struggling in noise, but now you're really struggling in quieter environments on those one-on-one conversations. That's when I would think I would encourage you to come in for the cochlear implant evaluation. Lastly, there is this 60-60 guideline in the world of audiology where if your word recognition score on your hearing test, your basic annual hearing exam, is below a 60%, and your pure tone average or your thresholds is also greater than 60 dB, that would be a good time to refer for the evaluation and see if you qualify for the cochlear implant. Next. So I tried to break it down. This is how at Columbia we structure our appointments. So in the blue, you see our preoperative or pre-surgery appointments here. For the most part, the blue appointment timeline takes around 2 to 3 months. So it's not something you're kind of rushing into, or that you feel like the day you go for your cochlear implant evaluation, you just signed yourself away to go get this surgery. It by no means isn't like that at all. So the first step would be to come for a cochlear implant evaluation, which is with the audiologist. At that appointment, it's about 2 hours, and we talk to you about in more detail what a cochlear implant is and how it works. Then we spend a majority of the time testing to see how well you perform with hearing aids on. So a majority of the time when you go to the audiologist, they always test you without your hearing aids on. This time when you come in, we put on the newest and best hearing aids, and we test to see how well you can hear the beeps, repeat some words, and even repeat some sentences. So depending on how well or poorly you score on that evaluation, that is what can constitute you for being a audiologic candidate for a cochlear implant. If you qualify, we would then refer you to the neuro-otologist or the ear, nose, and throat doctor who specializes in cochlear implant surgery, and they would determine if you were a medical candidate. If you were still interested in getting the cochlear implant surgery, you would then move on to the pre-op requirements, including imaging, vaccination, medical clearance, and any other routine documentation that you would need prior to the surgery. Next, you would meet with the audiologist one more time to do what we call a device demonstration. So that's when we would go over the 3 different cochlear implant companies and decide which company, which processor, which accessories best suit your needs. Lastly, you would meet with our social worker who would help address any other hesitations, considerations for either the patient or the family. And if you were a pediatric patient, you would be evaluated by a speech language pathologist, as well as our educator and teacher for the deaf. The speech language pathologist and the educator would also work hand in hand with any early intervention specialists or therapists. On surgery day, the procedure is about 2 to 3 hours, and you typically go home the same day, depending on how well you're feeling. After surgery, you won't hear anything from the implanted ear for about 2 to 3 weeks while we wait for everything to heal. You will meet with the doctor, the otologist, about 1 week after the surgery, just to make sure everything is healing as planned. You will then meet with the audiologist for the initial activation, which is about 2 to 3 weeks after surgery. This is when we turn on the device and give you the outside portion.
One of the nicest stores on campus. My wonderful full-size bed.
Afterwards, you would come for several follow-up visits or programming appointments with the audiologist. At Columbia, we typically do a 1 week, 1 month, 3 month, 6 month, and 1 year visit. You will then meet with the speech language pathologist, and she will help do some oral rehab or listening exercises. This usually happens around the 1 month mark and will continue to go throughout the first year. And then lastly, you will have routine follow-up with your CI team, mostly the audiologist. So it is really important that you find an audiologist that you're comfortable with and trust, because they will be a part of this journey for your lifetime. Next. So what to expect? If we're talking about the prelingually deaf patients, you're going to hear me say this a lot, but consistent device use and consistent therapy is key. There was a study that said 80% of children received a cochlear implant before the age of 12 months demonstrated receptive vocabulary knowledge within the normal range by the time they entered school. And then 81% of children who received cochlear implants early, so around that 12-month mark, attended mainstream schools. Next. So if you have a child that just got a cochlear implant and you're wondering what should I be expecting from them, this is a good summary of what you would expect throughout the first 12 months. So the first month, the main goal is to just wear that cochlear implant as much as possible and get the child used to wearing it. Around the 3-month mark, that's when they should kind of start vocalizing, babbling, and randomly kind of responding to their name. At 6 months, they should start responding to their name a little bit more consistently and alerting to some environmental sounds, such as a door slamming, the doorbell ringing, a dog barking. Around 9 months is when we should be able to put them in the audiology booth, and they should be able to kind of associate the presence and absence of sound, so that true detection, and show us when they can hear versus not hear the signal. And then around 12 months, that's when the meaning of speech will come around and their language will really start to improve. Next. So this slide looks a little bit busy, but it is a really good chart that documents what to expect for the first years 1 to 4 after getting a cochlear implant in the prelingually deaf. So again, this would probably be a child between the ages of 2 and 5. So everything shaded in the blue is year 1 goals. Everything shaded in orange is year 2, purple is 3, and yellow is year 4. So similar to normal hearing children, the cochlear implant children will slowly develop these language skills and improve upon them as they become more familiar and more immersed in a larger vocabulary. So at first, it's going to be something simple as detecting the different sounds. Eventually, they'll be able to imitate phonemes, babble. Then it will be answering some basic questions such as where's mama, and kind of looking. And then eventually they'll be able to, around the 2 to 3 year mark, get into the identifying different words within a category. So if it was animals, horse, which is 1 syllable, chicken, which is 2, and kangaroo, which is 3. So the skills will slowly build upon each other as they get older and more familiar with sound and vocabulary. Next. So all of these skills cannot be met unless the child wears the cochlear implant. More speech in is going to equate to more speech out. So this is a study that shows that children by the age of 3, if they were wearing their cochlear implant at all waking hours, they developed normal spoken language. If the child was only wearing the cochlear implant about 60% of the time they were awake, they did have delayed spoken language. And then if it was 20%, they were severely delayed in their language development. And then children who were planted over the 12-month mark needed to do a lot more listening therapy compared to the normal, to catch up to the normal spoken language scores. Next. Okay, so in the post-lingually deaf category, what would you expect when we first turn on the cochlear implant? So at first, it's going to sound like noise, but with time, this will improve. I typically tell patients speech understanding begins around the 3 to 6 month mark. Keep in mind, this is a completely new way your brain is hearing. You're not used to hearing with an electrical stimulation, so it is going to take time and consistent use of your processor. So there was another study with adults that showed that if patients wore their processor for about 10 hours a day, their word recognition score was between 24 and 82%. And if they increase it to 15 hours a day, the score increased to 40 to 92%. So if you just look at those lower end scores, it almost doubles with that extra 5 hours of use. When you first put on a cochlear implant and it doesn't sound good, sometimes people may get a little discouraged and they expect to start hearing speech right in the beginning. And this is the worst analogy, but the best one I could think is, imagine you broke your leg and your leg was in a cast for a month. And then we took off the cast. No one expects you to go run in the New York City Marathon the next week. We have to kind of start back at the beginning and retrain the leg muscles to get back to where it used to be. So yes, you're going to have to go back to your basics of learning how to bend the knee, stand on it, walk, run, and then jog. So that's the same with your speech understanding. In the beginning, you'll hear people are talking, but you won't understand them. But the more you listen and the more you do your exercises and your physical therapy, the better it will start to sound with time. You will work with a speech pathologist to improve these listening skills. However, it's important for you to do it also independently so that it continues to progress throughout the first year. Next. Oh, that was it. So with that, I would like to hand it over to our panel so they could tell us a little bit more firsthand about their experience with cochlear implants.
Thank you. I think, Toni, could you speak first, and then the Romeos will speak after Toni. So Toni, because Toni's an adult implant recipient, and Joshua was a prelingual implant recipient. So they have quite different experiences. So Toni, go ahead.
Thank you very much. It's wonderful to be here and to finally speak about my cochlear implant. So this is the first time that I'm publicly speaking about this experience. And I think there are a couple of reasons why I waited so many years. I was implanted about 2.5 years ago. And the first reason is, just like when you lose your hearing loss or when you get your first hearing aids, getting a cochlear implant is a real emotional roller coaster. You have fears, you have expectations, and then the big day arrives. And it just takes a lot of time to settle in. Plus, your brain is waking up more and more every day, and it's really quite amazing. But it's also kind of exhausting in a good way. The second reason I waited so long is because I've had severe survivor's guilt. The prognosis for my implant was not really too great because I'd been deaf for 16 years. A couple of other things, which I'll explain later on. But I figured, here I had this wonderful thing happen to me. What if I tell other people about it and their adjustment is not as good? I don't want to give people false hope. But then I realized, by being so conscious about not giving people false hope, I wasn't giving people any hope. So I've decided that I need to share this wonderful experience. And I will tell you right now, if I ended up with 20% of the gain that I have now with my implant, I would have been absolutely thrilled. So what I hope to accomplish in the next 15 minutes is to share my experiences, and everyone's experience is different. So it's important to talk to lots of people. I hope I'll also just kind of give you the incentive to explore a bit, to find out if you might be a candidate and to think about getting implanted if you are. And most importantly, to give you some hope of possibly improving your quality of life. So just to give you a real quick background on my hearing loss before I talk about my hearing gain, I started to lose my hearing or be aware of it, and other people were aware of it in my early 20s. I put off getting my hearing aid for the usual 10 years, tried to find a doctor who could cure me. I finally got a hearing aid. Didn't tell people for years that I was wearing one. So much stigma. I hid it underneath my hair. When I was 45, I suddenly lost the hearing in my right ear. We didn't find out till later that the reason was that I'd had an acoustic neuroma, which is a tumor, non-cancerous, that causes the auditory nerve to be compromised to a certain extent. We didn't know quite how much. So I wore a hearing aid in my left ear. Oh, and so I was completely deaf, heard no sound and no words in the right ear. I wore a hearing aid in my left ear, it was helping a little, but my hearing continued to deteriorate. And finally, in 2006, I was at a concert. I was always very careful to remove my hearing aid and plug my ear, but that evening, for some foolish reason, I decided I was just going to stay unplugged and hear the music. And long story short, a week later, I was hospitalized because I'd become completely deaf, and I was given steroids for a week, but it did not help. So I walked out of the hospital profoundly deaf. I could hear no words and no sounds. I had to rely completely on speech reading and the written word to be able to communicate with anyone. Fortunately, I found Hearing Loss Association of America. The first meeting I ever went to, I didn't even know how I was going to understand what was going on at the meeting. And we had CART, Lauren Schechter, who's here with us carting tonight. She was the CART transcriber. And as soon as I saw the words go up on the screen, I started to cry. I couldn't believe that I could finally, people complain about attending meetings. To me, it was such a gift, to be able to exchange ideas and to participate in something. I also learned, communication strategies. I made good friends, and I cultivated a love for advocacy and communication access. So in retrospect, I think the most important thing I did for those 16 years when I couldn't hear was to force myself to stay engaged. I continued to work. I hung out with friends and family. I went to dinners in restaurants. I went to theater meetings with captioning, and believe me, it would have been so much easier to just lay on the couch and not deal with all of that stress and exhaustion, but I forced myself to do it. And as we all know, brain health is really important and we have to stay active. So I'd heard about CIs, of course, but initially I was not a candidate because I had the tumor, I had to be monitored every year with an MRI. So there are magnets and metal, so I could not have an MRI. After a certain number of years, I don't remember quite how long, they solved that problem. So now you can safely be MRI'd with a cochlear implant. But even when I found out that I could have one, I waited a few years to get one. And thinking about it again, I think one of the reasons was, I was managing. I was living my life. I'd done this for 16 years. Why go through the surgery? Why get disappointed if I didn't have some gain? I'm not great with change. And I just said, it's not that bad. I'll just stay where I am. The biggest reason, and I've heard so many people say this, and this was a real fear. After I had become deaf a few years later, I met a friend at one of the HLAA conventions, and she had really bad hearing loss. And she said, I got this super duper powerful hearing aid. You should try it. I said, no, it's not going to help. I can't hear words. For some reason, I decided to try it. And I heard a low murmur. I heard sound. It was nothing intelligible. It would get louder in a noisy place, but it was a godsend because I had been living in a soundproof room, essentially, and all of a sudden I had some sound that oriented me a tiny bit to where I was. And I was petrified of losing that. What finally made me decide was my son, Gian, was really pushing me to get an implant. And I've questioned him about why. And he said simply because he'd read about them and he really hoped that I could improve the quality of my life. For me, I think I finally decided because of his enthusiasm, and his career is as a songwriter and a producer, and I had never been able to hear his music. And even though the prognosis for music was not good, I figure, maybe I can just try this. So off we went, and Gian and I interviewed with 3 excellent CI surgeons. Gian was there either live or Zoom because he lives in LA. And I finally made my decision, and I went with Dr. George Alexiadis. He was at Weill Cornell at the time. Now he's out in Long Island at NYU. And there were a couple of reasons why I chose him. I felt that he was not, promising me that this was all going to be fabulous. He finally just said, look, if I didn't think there was going to be some gain, I wouldn't be doing this. And that sounded right to me. Also, he agreed to implant me on the right side. My left side would have been the better chance. I would have had a better chance in terms of the fact that I was hearing some sound for many of the 16 years. The right ear, there was no sound. There was a tumor there. We didn't know if the nerve was compromised, but I felt very strongly about keeping that low murmur in the left ear. So Dr. Alexiadis agreed to implant me in the right ear. And that said a lot to me because he's a surgeon. You would think he'd want to implant in the ear that would have the most success, rather than taking more of a chance. But he listened to me and he knew about my fears and he said, let's just go for it. So we did. And I began the pre-surgery process. So one of the things about that is, millions of questions and forms and all of that. And I started to think about pre-op when I would arrive at the hospital. And I said, I'm not going to hear anything. They're going to ask me all these questions. I'm going to be nervous. John was going to be there. He would be nervous. I can speech read him beautifully, but I didn't want him to have to play that role that day. I wanted him to be able to just be present and do whatever he needed to do. So it was quite a feat to get CART at the hospital, even though Dr. Alexiadis and Dr. Joseph Montano, who many of you know, they advocated for CART for me. About a week before I was to have my surgery, I got another email saying, sorry, we don't have someone, we can't provide this for you, et cetera, et cetera. And I remember I just said, if I don't have CART in writing the day before, I'm not doing this surgery. And I meant it. And I said to John, get ready, because this may not happen. Fortunately, it did happen. I'm going to tell you a quote. Very recently, we lost a champion advocate for people with hearing loss and deafness. Many of you probably knew or heard John Waldo. There is a quote from him that I absolutely love, and it goes to this experience of trying to get CART. And he said, quote, if you don't ask for what you specifically need, other people are going to make the decision for you, end quote. So just think, do we really want to give other people that much power over our healthcare? So long story short, pre-op, fabulous. The nurses, the doctors, everyone was standing around looking at the CART screen, and they could see how much easier it was for me. So everything went very smoothly. Then it was time to go into surgery. And I realized I hadn't thought about what was going to happen with communication. When I woke up, John would not be there. This was towards the end of COVID, and people were not allowed to stay in the hospital. And I was really angry with myself because here I'm supposed to be an advocate, and I didn't even think about it. But I just said, well, I'm just going to have to wing it. I woke up in the recovery room. My hearing aid amazingly was right on my pillow because I said I was going to need it, but I took one look at it and I was just too tired to put it in. Then I noticed a nurse sitting a few feet away with a table and a laptop. And I said, oh, no, I'm going to have to answer all of these questions. So I was actually fake sleeping for a while to avoid it. And he finally noticed I was stirring and he looked at me. He started typing. He turns the laptop around, and in huge, beautiful fonts, it said, hi, Toni, how are you feeling? And it was just an incredible feeling. It was the first time I'd ever gotten an accommodation without asking for it. Apparently, the hospital had learned from the process that I was going to need written communication. So it was great. Went home, everything was fine, no problem. I had a great chat with a nurse before I left, and that was it. I have to tell you, again, everyone's experience is different. The surgery was not a big deal at all for me. I took one Tylenol, no painkillers, post-surgery. The day of surgery, I went home, I rested, then John and I went and took a walk, got something to eat. Next day, out walking, ran a bunch of errands. And then the third day, John was flying back to LA and he said, okay, you're right. You're going to just chill and relax. And I said, no problem. I'm fine. And as soon as he walked out the door, I jumped in the shower and I got dressed and I went to work and I felt terrific. So then my activation. So John flies in again and we're ready for the big day. So I'm scared. And I'm just saying to myself, you said if you just get a murmur in the other ear, that would be fabulous. So I also asked for CART for my activation because I've heard, for an hour you listen to beeps. I figured this is going to be good emotional or bad emotional. And I wanted to be able to hear that it would be very stressful. So they were a little surprised, I'm getting an implant, I'm being activated, why do I need CART? And I think more food for thought is to think about how we go to meet with our audiologists, hearing health professionals, because we can't hear. And how many times have any of us, myself included, asked for CART in those appointments, used voice recognition software, anything? We don't do it. So I had CART, and Lauren Schechter was my CART person. I used to say to Lauren, I wish you were there to CART my whole life. And here she was at my activation. Long story short, I wanted Gian to hear Gian's voice first because I hadn't heard it for 16 years. So Haley, my CI audiologist, signaled that she had turned me on. I started knocking on the table, heard some sound, and then I pointed to John and he started to speak. And I will tell you, it was the worst sound I have ever heard in my life. They say Mickey Mouse, they say, electronic. I can't describe it. And my first thought was, they got to take this thing out of my head. I can't live with this. It was horrible. So John kept talking and I went like this because it was painful. And then I was trying to start to talk. My voice, I was speaking so slowly. It was funny. I think my brain was kicking in and I started to say, this is really hard. It sounds terrible. And all of a sudden I realized not only was I hearing the sound of my voice, but I was hearing my words. And I turned to John and I said, speak again. And he started to speak. And I said, no, I'm not understanding. And I turned to Haley and I said, you say something to me because female voices are usually better for me. So she's masked and she said, what did you have for breakfast? And I turned to John and looked at him and I said, I didn't have anything for breakfast. I heard her loud and clear through the mask, and John and I just lost it. It was so emotional and it was like miraculous. The next thing I remember, we were on the way home in a cab. I was looking out at Central Park. John was on the phone. He got off the phone. I was thinking, oh, it's so beautiful, this beautiful, wonderful day. And I said to John, what did Sandy say? And he said, how'd you know I was talking to Sandy? And I said, well, I heard what you were saying. And we both just looked at each other. So it was quite amazing. So what did I do after I was activated? I listened. I jumped back into my life. I had dinner watching TED Talks with captions and without. I talked to friends as much as possible. I eventually talked on the phone, which people didn't think I was going to be able to do either. And I worked really hard at listening to music. I listened to different instruments and it got better and better and better. And I would say from what I can remember of music right now, I hear about 85%, and it's totally rewarding. I can feel it in my soul. Some of the highlights of my adjustment: I spend less time, less energy, and a lot less emotion trying to hear every second of my life. I have more fun. I go to the theater. I was at the opera this week. I still need captions because it's not crystal clear, but I don't have to look at the captions as often. I can hear the music. I've worked in the same place for a very long time. I don't know, 12 years or something. And I was able to get by. We all figured out how to communicate with me so I could do my job. But now these people are my friends. I can chit chat with them. It's all so normal and so wonderful. And most importantly, I feel safer. Not only can I hear ambient noise, sirens, or whatever, but I can hear people's voices and the inflection in their voices, which really tells you a lot about people. So that makes me feel very good. My biggest takeaways, one thing I look back and I say, how did I ever not hear for 16 years? Okay, but we did it. I did it. We all do it, but we should give ourselves the benefit of more options if we can. Life became easier for me, but also for the people in my life. A few weeks ago, I had a little glitch with my processor and it went through 2 days, basically without hearing again. So I would be with a friend and I would tell them and they go, oh, okay. And all of a sudden their whole face changed. They spoke differently. Their whole persona was different. So I realized, it's the oxygen mask. You have to take care of yourself first. But I realized what an impact this had on other people, and that maybe I need to pay more attention to that in my life as well. So I'll always be grateful for the things that my hearing loss has brought me in my life, but I am exceedingly grateful for the richness that I have with this new technology. And if you're a possible candidate, I hope you will explore and talk to people. You don't have to learn everything about a CI. I was really on the low end of understanding before I was implanted, but just talk to people and listen and trust your gut. And most of all, listen to your heart. Final story. I'm in Target and I'm going up an escalator and all of a sudden there's music playing. I could tell. I had just been listening to music for maybe a couple of months. So I could hear some words and I'm like, this is familiar. And I could hear the beat to the music. So I get to the top of the escalator. I run over to some young person that was working there. I said, do you know the name of this song? So she tells me. I said, my God, that's one of the songs that John wrote and produced. And I started to cry. So I text John. I said, you're not going to believe this. I'm in Target and they're playing your song. So he laughs and he says, yeah, I know people have told me that, they hear my music in weird places. And I remember standing there saying out loud to myself, and it's pretty much how I can sum up the experience of my cochlear implant. And that is to say, who would have ever imagined? So please give yourself a chance. Thanks for listening. Thank you, Megan. Back to you.
Thank you, Toni. That was really wonderful. So Helen and Josh have come at the cochlear implant experience in a different way. So I'm going to let the two of you decide how you want to divide up your conversation. And I'm going to mute myself so you don't hear my dog again. Okay, bye.
Hi, everybody. I'm Helen. This is Joshua. I do have a lot of notes and tell you the story. Joshua was born deaf. He did have the test done in the hospital, and the newborn screening. They first said and then they redid the second day. No, excuse me.
Sorry, Helen, could you stop a
He
minute?
did pass it. And then the second,
This is not coming through correctly. I don't think it's just me or other people having a problem. Yeah.
Terrible.
Maybe it would help if just you were in front of the screen talking, and then when Josh talks, he could be in front of the screen. Can we try that? Okay.
sure. Is that better?
I think it's
Oh.
your internet connection that's the problem, but yes, I think it'll be a little bit easier this way.
Okay. I'm sorry. Do you want me to over?
It could be better if she turned off
Not
her
work.
video.
Turn the video off.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Can everybody hear me now?
It is easier to understand, yeah, and it's not as distracting because your voice is not separated from your actual speaking. So I'm sorry not to be able to see you, but I think this is probably
That's
better. Does everybody agree? David?
Okay.
Yeah, I think so. I'm looking, if it's helpful, I can give you a phone number to call and talk via the telephone so that the audio comes through a telephone connection.
Okay.
I'm looking to see if I can find a dial-in number in the meantime.
Okay. I'm gonna text them.
Dial-in number.
I can't hear anything.
I don't think anyone's see. Apparently our connection is terrible.
Okay, I have the dial-up number, David. It's so Helen,
Great.
you try this. It's
Yeah. 646-518-9805. I don't know if it's going to work. Just to check, is it 646-518-9805?
I think so, yeah. Try that one.
Welcome to Zoom. Enter your meeting ID followed by pound.
Do you know what the meeting ID is?
Yeah, I have it.
Entered
I will put it in the chat. I just
All right.
put, the meeting ID in the chat.
You have not entered. You entered 9160954. This meeting ID does not exist. Goodbye.
It didn't work.
Oh, I'm giving you a second. I misinput.
Welcome to Zoom. Enter your meeting ID followed.
Okay, I think the best thing then, Helen, would be for us to separate the video and the audio. So just to turn off your video and we'll.
Meeting ID.
Okay.
Re-enter your meeting ID followed by pound. Welcome.
Are you able to hear now at all?
Yes, but speak slowly because the captions are behind you.
Okay. I'm going to introduce myself again. I'm Helen Romeo, and my son is Joshua, and he was born profoundly deaf. We found out at his year appointment, we found out that he was deaf. However, my husband and I knew something was wrong because as a baby, he would not startle at all. Our dog would bark. He would not turn at all. He slept soundly. And we just felt in our hearts that something wasn't going right. As new parents, you hear people say, oh, that you know, your child's used to hearing the dog, so the dog doesn't bother you. He's used to hearing the vacuum, it doesn't bother him. However, we really felt like, why isn't he babbling? Why isn't he trying to talk to us, make any kind of words? He would not try to speak out. He would make a internal sound. He would suck in like air almost, and it was a little disturbing. So we asked our doctor to please, at the year checkup, please examine what's going on. The doctor did say to us that, yes, definitely something was not right. So they sent us for an ABR, which is the auditory brain test, and that showed that his nerves were working, but it seemed like his cochlear, the internal, the follicles were not working. So we went to a couple other places that there's a couple of steps that they had us do. He had to have a couple of tests to make sure that, you know, there was nothing else physically wrong. And he had to have the normal hearing test. Make a long story short, he definitely, he was profoundly deaf. So now my husband and I had to make the choice of what do we do? We were devastated. We were scared. It was traumatizing to us at the time because being new parents, you just, the world felt like it crashed down on us. What were we going to do? How were we going to communicate with him? None of us knew sign language. It was a very scary situation. However, they, during the ABR test, the people at the hospital, which there was different hospitals for us. So they told us there's help. There's situations you could look at. They gave us pamphlets. They told us to go online. So that's when I started doing my research, and I pulled up Cochlear Americas. They had a great website to explain things. They also had a lot of great reviews. They also had stories about, you know, how some people it didn't work for. So to me, that was like it was telling you the truth, and it was telling you the good and the bad. And to me, that was a good thing to hear. Because usually if you just hear everything's great, you're not too sure about it. my husband and I, we also looked up online the surgery and how it would be done. And again, that was an extremely scary, terrifying situation when you have a little baby that might have to undergo surgery. So the next step we did is we started searching for specialists, and who was I going to choose? There was a couple of choices. I went with Yale New Haven for his first implant. We had Dr. Kavitan, and I chose him because he was one of the first doctors that had done implants in the United States. So I felt very good about that. We met with the team, and it was extremely nice. They explained everything. They had us come in the night before surgery, and they showed Joshua around, and just to see, like, this is not a scary place. And again, now you have a child who, you can't hear what's going on. So they're visually showing him, they're putting him in a gown and showing him that it wasn't scary. The day of surgery was extremely scary. I think he was in for about 2.5 hours for the surgery. And the doctor came out and told us everything went well. The audiologist came out and said when they checked everything went great. And that in a couple hours when he woke up, he could come home. So we went in and we went to see him, and he looked like a little mummy. He was a little wrapped up. He had his little head wrapped up. And they said, okay, it's time to go home. Now, we lived about an hour and a half away from the hospital. So we figured it was going to be a scary little trip, but he was great. He came home and there was no problems. I actually wish I had a picture to show you guys, but I couldn't find it. He had a little toy box, and my husband and I turned and looked, and he had climbed in it, and he had stuck his little head out with the bandage and all, and he was like waving to us. And that was within hours of the surgery. So that is something that I was extremely grateful for, that the relief of it went well, because it is very scary. He was 12 months old, and I forgot to tell you that, I'm sorry. He, a month later, was activated. This is gonna be a little hard for me. My husband and I, we went in, and they said, are you ready? We did videotape it, old-fashioned videotape with the recorder, and they plugged everything in, and they gave us a thumbs up, and they had me say his name. And when I said Joshua, he turned around right away and looked at me. And it was a sigh of relief that he could hear something. And it was the first time he heard my voice. And then all of a sudden he started to cry, because to him it was noise and that he's never heard before. It was a very happy moment, and it almost felt like he was born again. And when the child comes out, they're crying, and that's kind of like what he did. He kind of was first shocked and looked, and then he cried, and from that point on, it was a complete miracle for us. It was a long road, and we had the speech pathologist that had come in at first to try to help us with some sign language. And he was getting a few things like cookie and milk and mom and dad, cookie being the favorite. And they said to us, okay, now you have to stop with the sign language and you have to use your words. And you talk to him all the time, nonstop. You read books to him all the time, nonstop. And my husband and myself and a big team of our family, we all did what they were told us to do. And he would have his speech pathologist who came in to our house at the time once a week and would work with him and show me what to do for that week. And he was the typical kid. We had to put him in his high chair and strap him in because he didn't want no part of it. but he did like his implant. He never tried to take his implant off. Once he heard sound, it was,
Stuck to me.
yeah,
I would say.
he
Yeah.
was stuck to you. Like he just, if Joshua at right now could sleep with them and have them on 24/7,
I would. Definitely.
he's answering. Yes, he would. He would definitely have them on. For a parent, like I want to let everybody know as a parent, like a lot of thoughts go into this, and the specialist, we also went to Wild Cornell for his second implant. I'm going to jump to that story quick. He was older when we had his second implant done.
I was, I believe, 8 at that point.
He was going to be 8
Young-
years old,
yeah.
and I didn't want to make that decision for him. I wanted to give him the first choice of, okay, we're making this choice for him, so he will be able to take this off if he doesn't like it and live in a deaf community, or he can have the choice to live in a hearing community.
I remember them coming to me one day. It was just I think it was a normal weekend day, and they just asked me straight up. They sat me down and asked, "We have the opportunity to get you a second implant. Do you want to get another implant? Do you want to stay with one, or would you like to take it off and live in a deaf world?" And I chose, after some thinking, I really wanted to try, even if it was hard for me and I struggled. I really wanted to expand my hearing and be able to hear more around me and become more in the hearing role.
And what I did too is I was lucky enough to run into a young gentleman and who was in a shopping center who worked there, and he had 2 implants, and he was about 17, 18 years old. And I had asked him nicely if he wouldn't mind if I brought Joshua up to meet him, so that Joshua would see that there's more, there's more on your head, there's more gear. And I wanted him to make sure that that was something he really wanted to do. And the young boy said yes. I gotta say, if you see people with the implants, it's a community that you always connect.
They will understand what you've gone through or what you are about to go through. It's great to try talk to them. And to reach out to more people, even if you just see them across the store and you see it on the back of your head, just try have a conversation, because they'll understand where you're coming from. And it's great to have that one-on-one conversation.
Yeah, I think that's
very important thing.
Yeah, it's an important thing. And I think if you're a parent and you need some advice, like, is this worth it? Yes, absolutely worth it. Joshua is now in the 11th grade, and he is a high honors child. In his 8th grade graduation, he was his salutatorian.
Second in the class.
Second in his entire class.
Scary moment. I had to prepare a speech, and I was like in front of like 500 people, and it was a nerve-wracking thing. And I worked so hard all the time to try aspire to be this person. I wanted to do more. I wanted to excel in school, and I tried so hard, and it felt great standing up there and being who I am and speaking to people. I spoke about where I came from and how far I've come and how much effort it took to get to me where I am now.
It was a lot of teamwork.
Yes.
It's teamwork, and the implants are just amazing, because when we started out, he had a little pack that he used to wear on his back with a cord, and we went from this big bulky implant to now it looks barely noticeable. It looks like you're wearing a Bluetooth. People have no idea that it's even there.
Most people wonder if I'm wearing AirPods nowadays, because that's what it kind of looks like. It's the technology is amazing how far it's come and how well it works.
And I remember also asking Joshua, when he was going through his second implant, we had found out I was pregnant with my second child. And I looked at Joshua and I said, if your sister is born deaf, would you implant her? And his words were, yes, Mom. And I said, Joshua, if she is deaf and I implant her, should I implant her with 1 implant or 2? And he said 2 right away.
2 from the beginning, yes.
2 from the beginning. He says, having the world completely around you was much better.
Yes, I remember when I got my second implant, it was a struggle. When the day I got implanted, so this is 3 weeks after surgery, it was a different world. It was like relearning how to hear again from the beginning. Like I was thrown all the way back 7 years before, or 8 at that point. I felt empty. It was just like very minimal sound. It was like an unreal. It was like I was listening to like computer feedback or something. And I had to relearn again from the beginning.
Sorry. Okay. He did very good though. He adapted. He had to wear the second implant and take the first one off to stimulate the nerve that his ear hadn't heard for 8 years. So he had to wear it. He watched some games that they had that was connected that would respond, and he would almost like take a test and to see how well he was doing. And the more he wore it, the better things were for him and for everybody around you, because it's definitely,
It's a great way to communicate. I've made many friends through hearing, and it's just great to be able to communicate with others. And I can live like a very normal life, like I'm with everyone else. Even though I do not have my hearing, I can still communicate with people and understand. And it's just great to have that ability.
I'm just trying to think what else I could do. As far as the different brands of, there's different brands out there of cochlears. I read up on all of them, of course. I did a checklist, which ones had the same options, which ones had different options. And Cochlear Americas was the one that stood out the best to us, and that's the one we use. And the technology is just getting better and better. And our team from Wild Cornell is absolutely amazing. Michelle is his speech therapist or speech pathologist there, and it's a family. It's just a family. Like I can go in and kind of just leave them there, and they pick on him like I would, and they treat him just like anybody else. I remember her telling me he's going to be a typical teenager. He's going to give you a hard time. And she was absolutely right.
Not that bad.
The implant just gave him a world of, I don't want to say normalcy, because it is.
It's
a
world of understanding.
Yeah.
A world of way to understand others is the best way. That we'll be able to connect with other people.
And you don't have to lip read all the time.
Yes.
He also he did so well from 12 months old to being activated at 13 months old, to doing his speech therapy, to going to his special needs preschool. He went on a bus at 2 years old, and he graduated the program early, and they had never had that before. So the implant was that well made at that time that they graduated him early. He started mainstream school right on time. He had speech for about 3 weeks in school, and they said he doesn't need this. He's ahead of the game. He's ahead of his peers. So I'm glad I made the choice. I'm glad my husband and I made the choice. If you're out there and you're wondering, should I do this for my child, or should I do this if I'm older? I definitely would say yes to this.
Yeah.
He's inspiring to me. He's got a vocabulary that is exceptional, and I sometimes don't understand it because he's done so well in school. And that right there, to be able to, in 8th grade, to go from deaf to standing in front of your peers and their parents and your school and to give a speech just tells you how well this product does for you and how it can change your world. I guess that's how
It's made my world.
it
It is what I am, and it makes me who I am today. It allows me to do everything I can do.
and I think his he had a ending quote with his speech, and I think that was
I apply to my life every day. If you have brains in your head and feet in your shoes, you can steer yourself in any direction you choose. You can go anywhere as you want in life, and you can take yourself wherever you want. And you have to take the opportunities and use what you have to bring yourself up to what you can be.
And if it wasn't for the implants, I'm not sure we would be there. But for the miracle of the implant, we're there. And I hope that other people have this chance to do the same thing. And I hope that he can inspire a lot of people out there, because I know I look up to him.
Thank you.
And the journey has. Go ahead. I'm sorry. It was a long.
I think we want to have a little bit of time for questions. This is very moving. Josh, you speak so eloquently about your experience. It's hard to believe you're still in high school. But so I think, I'm not sure people have questions. If you do have questions, click on reactions and raise your hand. And I do see quite a few already. So if you can keep your questions short, and if you can also try to keep your answers short, because we only have 15 more minutes. So John, you start.
Yeah, I'll be quick. It was inspiring, Toni and Joshua and Helen, but I had the pleasure of actually viewing the videotape of Josh speaking at his 8th grade graduation. And I guess the question I have is, I was impressed with how poised he is. I'm impressed at how articulate he is, but I'm also amazed at how clear his speech is. And had they waited longer and not done it at 12 months, what would the prognosis for that have been?
John, I'm not sure your question is clear. If they had waited, if he had done, could you repeat that?
Would he be speaking as clearly if he hadn't been implanted so early? And I guess that's a question for Meghan.
Okay, good. Thank you. Meghan, do you have an answer?
Yeah, that's a very loaded question, a good question. The goal is, especially nowadays, Josh is a little bit older. So 16 years ago, I think the goal was around implanting by 2, and you could still have pretty clear speech, but the goal now is to do it before the 12 months to really kind of get that 80% mainstream vocabulary. So if he waited until about 2, I would probably say he would have some pretty clear speech, but I think the fact that he got it right around 1 year old is what really made the difference. Did that answer?
I think so. Al, Jen.
Hi. Thank you, Toni. Thank you, Helen and Josh. Wonderful presentation. It was inspirational to hear all of your stories. I have 2 quick questions. At least to Toni, I know you mentioned the MRI can be done with the cochlear implant. The first quick question is there any other situation that we have to be aware of before getting cochlear implant in terms of what we cannot do? I'm glad to hear now we can have MRI. Is there anything else that we need to be aware of? So that's the first question. The second question is, after your surgery, were you able to go home unassisted? I know that you can go home right after the surgery, but can you go home unassisted, or is it like you have eye surgery, you still need help to get somewhere kind of thing? Those are my 2 questions.
I can try and answer the first question. I don't know of any other limitations, but I would think that's something that not only do you talk to your CI surgeon or your audiologist, but also your primary care physician, because there may be different things, just in general with surgery. In terms of going home, I'm really big on that. Sometimes you're supposed to have someone come and get you. And I always say, oh, I have car service downstairs. There's people waiting for me. And I just get on the train and go home. It's surgery. And even though I was fine, I was glad my son was there. I would not suggest that anyone come home by themselves, just have someone come with you. I think it's a good idea.
Can I expand on that too? So MRI is compatible up to 3.0 Tesla with all the new things, the new cochlear implants. There's no other, like you could still get a CT scan, X-ray. The only other thing is that if you were going to an airport, you would have to have a little card saying that you have metal in your head, so that when you do go through security, they are aware of that. And then going home on surgery, at least at Columbia, we really encourage you to have somebody just to support you to go home. Part of your balance system is in your ears, so you may be a little dizzy afterwards, and fall risks would be something that I wouldn't want happening if you're navigating your New York City walk up or something like that. So just in terms of safety, I would not suggest you to go home alone.
Can I add one thing? I've had a cochlear implant for 14 years and I have never been stopped at security and never been asked a question. So I mean, they catch my bottle of water or my belt buckle, but never the cochlear implant. David, you have a question?
Yeah, for Josh, I was curious, you came out very, very happy and pro implant. I'm curious how either now or when you were younger, how your peers have reacted to you and your implants. Are they aware of them? Do they treat you differently? Is it completely irrelevant? What's that interaction been like?
So when I started mainstream school, I started in kindergarten with any other kid. I really haven't had that experience of being excluded because of it, because I was with the same kids since the beginning. They just knew me, they saw it, and they just knew that was part of me. I really wasn't seen differently or like anything because of it. It was part of me. And I would like receive questions from younger kids, but most kids were usually in awe or like confused, just a little confused, and they've never seen it before. And kind of just have to explain to them. Most kids, like for me with my grade, everyone just knew it as part of me, and I just went on.
The younger, you have a lot more adults that may stop and ask questions. The kid, his peers, he actually had shown them at one point what it was and how it worked as they got older.
Yeah.
But I don't think I can't answer too much. I don't think you've never been picked on, right?
No.
Never been picked on about it. Never been bullied about it. He actually he played sports with a lot of people too. I forgot to add that for you guys. He played baseball. He played soccer. He did cross country. So his peers knew that he was just like
another person
like everybody else.
Yep.
That's really great to hear.
Peggy?
Well, I just have to say that my daughters are always telling me that I exaggerate, but I do think that in probably 20 years of going to chapter meetings, this meeting is the best meeting I have ever attended. I just can't thank the presenters enough. Helen, the part of your story about letting Josh decide when he was older on the second implant, I just think that was a stroke of parenting brilliance. Josh, you're amazing. You're fabulous. Just keep doing what you're doing. And I'm going to tear up. My friend Toni, we love you so much. We're just so happy for you. So the only other thing I'll say to Al is that there actually is one thing you can't do right after you get your implant. For 3 weeks, you cannot blow your nose. And both Toni and I forgot. And you can call your surgeon and it's fine. So thank you for this wonderful meeting. It was just fabulous.
Can I say something? I don't see where I have a hand where I could wave, so I'm just gonna come out and speak. My granddaughter went to an open house. She's hearing, my daughter's hearing. I'm the one with the hearing impairment. They went up to college for an open house. My granddaughter's gonna start college next year. So she had a tour guide show them around campus, and her and another girl whom she never met before in her life. The two of them went on this tour guide. Well, the two mothers, my daughter and this other girl's mother, sat down and they started talking. The student that was with my daughter has a bilateral implant. The tour guide that took them around campus was a young man who was a student who has a bilateral implant. So of course the two mothers, they all come, because the grandmother here, I have my own implant. So for Josh, if you go on to college, hey, you're gonna meet all kinds of people there who have, God willing, an implant as well. It was very encouraging. But my granddaughter goes, oh, my grandma has one, this kind of thing. It was real good for all reasons. And that's that, my story.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Jim Kane has his hand up.
Yeah, two questions for Toni. How did you learn how to hear music with your cochlear implant? And how do you do in restaurants with background noise?
Okay, the first one with the music, there is software out there to help you to listen to music. John Taylor, who spoke in the beginning in our chapter, John also had an implant about the same time as I did, and John had a career as a professional musician. So he may be able to give you some tips on this. But for me, I just listened. When I'm at work 3 days a week, I have music on. It comes Bluetoothed right to my CI from my phone, and I would work on one instrument at a time. Like a piano sounded exactly like a harpsichord. I listened and listened, and now it sounds about 80% like a piano. Then I moved on to trumpets and everything else. So I just really worked on it on my own. Tell me the second question now. I forgot. What is it?
Second question is, how do you do in restaurants?
Oh, okay. So they're still difficult. What I do is with Cochlear, that's the brand that I have a mini mic. So if I'm with one person, it works beautifully. The restaurant could be very noisy. They wear the mic and it gets, again, Bluetooth to my CI. So it's like they're speaking right in my ear and it wipes out the rest of the sound. The rest of it is difficult. If I'm in a noisy place with a lot of people, it's easier because before I just heard total, silence. But now I have cues, but I also have to be very proactive and say, I have the CI, but it's amplifying, all the sound. And most people get it because most people with good hearing can't hear in a noisy restaurant either. So it just takes a lot of work and a lot of patience. And it's good to kind of include and educate other people about your experience.
Thank you.
Thanks, Toni. I just one person has a question in the chat that I wanted to pass on because I think the answer is very clear. She asked, once you have the CI, is your old way of hearing no longer available to you? That's kind of a basic question. And Toni, you could answer it. Actually, any one of you could answer it, or I could answer.
I'm not sure what you mean by old way. To me, my old way was my murmur. And so I didn't lose it. I still have the murmur in my unimplanted ear. So if you're talking about any residual hearing being wiped out, I think this is maybe a question for Meghan. But what happens is your brain has to relearn sounds. So I was constantly saying to people, what's that noise? It's somebody screaming. And they'd say, no, it's just the cat meowing. But as soon as my brain remembered, oh, okay, that's what a cat sounds like, then I knew every time I heard it that it was a meow. It's just fascinating to see your brain kick in. That's one of the most exciting parts of the experience. But Meghan, maybe you can give a better answer on residual hearing if that's what you're asking.
Yeah. So for residual hearing, it really depends on how much residual hearing you have left. If you do have some pretty good hearing left, especially in the low frequencies, the surgeon's goal is to always preserve it. And all three different companies have a way of monitoring while the surgeon is implanting the cochlear implant in. There is a way that they can monitor in the operating room to try to prevent any damage. I always counsel my patients that the chance of your hearing getting worse and possibly being completely destroyed is high, but hearing preservation is always a goal. And if they do preserve some of that low frequency hearing, there is something called a hybrid device where the cochlear implant will also turn into a hearing aid, and you could use an acoustic portion for the sounds you hear naturally with your acoustic hearing, and then the cochlear implant will take over for the electric portion. So that would be something we would test post-op to see if you do have any residual hearing. Then yes, we would try to maximize that and use it as well.
I think we actually have to stop because it's 7:30. But a lot of people still have their hands raised, and trying to think what we could do about your questions. You can send your questions into the website info@hearinglossnyc.com. I monitor that, and I will pass your questions on to whoever they were addressed to. I'm sorry to cut this off. Obviously, this is...
Catherine.org, I think, not .com.
Oh, sorry, it's .org. Yeah, I've been making that mistake for about 8 years. It's info@hearinglossnyc.org. Yeah, so I'm sorry to cut this off because the discussion is great. But we'll have another cochlear implant program soon because it's obviously of great interest to everybody. So it would also be terrific to hear from people about, if we do have another program, what you'd like us more to focus on, because we had two very, very distinctive stories here. And I think it would be good for us to know, which direction people would like to hear more about. So I want to thank you, Meghan, for explaining the process so clearly. And Toni and Helen and Josh, as Peggy Ellertson said, this is really unbelievably moving to hear you talk. It was, it's a meeting that will stick in all our memories for a long time. So thank you very, very much, everybody. And please do follow up with us about what more you'd like to hear on this subject. So we have to say goodbye. So long. Thank you.